Hello, everyone, and welcome to Genians Talk. My name is Michael Thomas Clark, and I'll be your moderator for today's Roundtable on Network Access Control, where we will discuss the current state of NAC, a venerable technology that has been with us as an important component of cybersecurity for many years now, but is nonetheless occasionally declared to be dead. Joining us today to explore the actual reality of NAC are two established NAC experts, analyst Tony Massimini of Frost Sullivan and Brett Hamill, a longtime veteran NAC field engineer and solutions architect at Genians. Thanks to each of you for joining us today.
Thank you, Michael.
Let's begin today's conversation, gentlemen, by considering some of the larger contextual aspects in which NAC operates. For starters, at this juncture in the evolution of cybersecurity defense practices, what do you think the ultimate goal of NAC actually is? And is NAC the only means available to achieve that goal? Tony, let me kick things off with you. What are you seeing from your vantage point these days at Frost & Sullivan?
Well, thanks, Michael. I'm a senior industry cybersecurity analyst at Frost & Sullivan. One of my areas of coverage has been network access control. And I'm here to tell you that NAC is not dead. Basically, what it is it's a foundational network security defense. This is what we know is the ultimate goal is to discover everything that's on your network. So you need to have visibility into everything that connects to your network, be able to verify the user and the device, make sure that it does have the correct security posture and access and authorization. Then you have to monitor all the activity on the network from that, and NAC allows you to enforce policy across all those endpoints. Traditionally, we've heard of NAC having the AAA focus: authentication, authorization, and audit. But NAC is continuing to grow and develop. And so now it's for orchestrating and integrating a wide variety of network and security infrastructure. So the goal is to provide a flexible endpoint policy management. And ultimately, you're trying to protect all the data and assets that are in your network. We talk about a layered approach to cybersecurity. And in that sense, NAC is the last line of defense if anything gets through anything else. The thing is that the network perimeter, not to make a pun of it all, has become nebulous. And that's because of the growth of the cloud and companies relying more on the cloud. And so we have greater migration to the cloud. And so the goal now is to extend NAC to the cloud. This way you have visibility across your entire enterprise, whether it's on-premise, on campus, the data centers, private cloud, public cloud, and now also the OT networks. So one goal now is to expand the scope of NAC. And it's mainly because you have environments that are more cloud-based services. You have mobile workloads and a growing number of unmanaged devices. So it's not just the traditional PCs and servers anymore. You have to take into account mobile applications, IoT, industrial IoT. And it comes down to providing classification for the users and the endpoints, because that's how you get visibility, and that's how you determine what the secure access policies should be. Companies, they have invested in a lot of different cybersecurity solutions, and NAC is able to orchestrate those technologies together. Now, one of the things to get a wider scope to get into the IoT and the IT-OT convergence has been the development of agentless technology. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But basically what it comes down to is NAC, you want to be able to stop the east-west attack, the lateral attack. Someone gets in, you assume someone's gonna breach that perimeter. You want to minimize the damage, and so segmentation has become an important aspect of NAC. There's been growing momentum for zero trust network, and that's basically a principle: never trust, always verify. It's not a single point solution. It's an architecture you develop by integrating and orchestrating the different security solutions you may already have. And NAC is a core technology to do that, because that is the technology that provides the visibility and be able to classify the users and endpoints, the segmentation, granular access policies, and of course, orchestrate and integrate these technologies together. So those are the goals of NAC.
You know, thanks, Tony. I think that's really compelling to me. I know in my consulting work that many people are still very focused on perimeter security, network security, thinking about it from a very kind of traditional and somewhat outmoded viewpoint. You make the good point that it's not just really, you know, perimeter security is one thing, but once if you do make the assumption that everyone's going to get breached sooner or later sometime, then you've got the reality of that traffic, that intrusion, you know, having breached you north-south wise, and now where's it going to go laterally, and what can it attack once it gets in? And so NAC has a value proposition, and that remains, and is, if anything, even more compelling than it once was as networking becomes more complicated. And I suppose you'd say then that, to paraphrase an old phrase, that rumors of its death have been somewhat exaggerated.
Yeah, very much so.
Thank you for that. So Brett, what are you seeing in the field as you, you know, where the rubber hits the road, so to speak?
Well, I think a couple of key points that I'd like to follow up on that Tony mentioned were some of the foundational functionality of NAC. That's not going away. So while things change, while the perimeter may change, while the level of visibility may change, it's important for us to consider also what hasn't changed. So what hasn't changed is that visibility is the core foundation, right? You need to have the visibility that you always had. The difference is now that you have to be able to expand that beyond legacy NAC device fingerprinting, and you need to move on from things like computer, phone, printer to things like BACnet router, PLC controller, IoT video cameras, etc. And you need to be very granular with that visibility. With Genians device platform intelligence, the way we've dealt with that challenge is to be able to create a new cloud managed database that gives you expanded visibility beyond general device categories and into low-level details about the country of origin of a device, for example, if it's end of life, you know, or end of sale, which could affect whether it's getting active patches or not, if there's any linked vulnerabilities to it, and then subcategories inside of general categories so you know what kind of device that is and can have more granular policies. So the visibility is still there, but it's just changed a little bit. Of course, relative to the perimeter that Tony talked about, you're going to have the challenge you always had, which is something Michael touched on, which was that, you know, being able to protect the east-west inside of a network. So your on-prem environment still needs to be protected like it always has been with NAC. However, you need to have the ability to also protect cloud resources as well. So that adoption rate to the cloud is going to vary depending on your company, the size of your company, the vertical market, your business priorities. So you may have companies that still have 100% on-prem. You may have companies that are 50% migrated to the cloud, or companies that are 90% migrated to the cloud. And you need to be able to have a solution that can address those. So with Genie and NAC, we have the ability to deploy the system virtually. So really the location of your network, the perimeter of your network is less important than it used to be. And then the last item really is the zero trust component. And that needs to be something that can be implemented quickly and easily. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about the future of NAC, but that is a component that historically wasn't really talked about that now needs to be a basic core component of your NAC solution.
All right, well, that all said, where are we seeing the major challenges to NAC adoption in today's IT environments? What kinds of obstacles are being presented, and how can they best be addressed? Again, We'll start with Tony, if you don't mind.
Well, not to beat a drum too often, but across all of cybersecurity, we keep seeing an increasing level of cyber attacks, not just the amount, but also the sophistication of those attacks. They keep changing all the time. So it's the challenge is being able to block all that malware, whether it's some new bugs that have emerged, new phishing schemes. But the thing to keep in mind is that regardless of all the different attacks that are there, every single endpoint on your network becomes a potential attack or reconnaissance point. So you can't just ignore something just because, oh, it's the HVAC system, for example, or it's an old piece of factory equipment. No, it connects to your network. It's a dangerous, potentially dangerous connection. The other challenge is handling the growth of those devices. We see a tremendous amount of growth going on. Frost Sullivan has forecast that by 2024, there will be 60 billion connected devices worldwide. Now, a lot of that is, of course, growth because you've got more people, more users, and now we see more the bring your own device type of use case. A lot of that driven as well recently by the work from home trend due to the response to the COVID-19 crisis. You have guests coming onto your network, contractors for different periods of time. And one that's really has a major impact is IoT, which we will discuss a little bit more. Now, the challenge is not just the growing number of devices, but also the growing variety. It's no longer an 80x86 microprocessor, Windows-based world anymore. It's not the traditional PC and server. You have different operating systems. You have different communication standards. You have legacy systems, which in particular comes into play when you talk about IoT and the convergence of IT and OT. Many of those systems were silos, never meant to be connected to anything. And now you have different vulnerabilities for each of those types of cases. So that's the challenge of being able to manage all of that. To talk a little bit more about the Internet of Things. NAC has for a long time depended on an IEEE standard 802.1x, and this requires an agent. And not a problem if you've got the traditional PC and server, but many of the devices on the internet, for the Internet of Things, do not have that kind of processing power, do not have the memory. They are just not capable of handling an agent installed on them. And so these are unmanaged devices. And so the challenge has been to develop an agentless NAC technology that allows the visibility and control of those unmanaged devices. Cloud usage, that keeps growing. Now, this is great when you have to rely on it, especially now that we have the work from home situation in response to COVID-19. But what we are seeing with using the cloud computing is you have multiple devices in multiple locations, a lot of remote workers as well. And as that cloud usage increases, the challenge is providing scalability. And so companies not just handling, being able to support a private cloud, but also public cloud, such as AWS, Azure, or other kind of cloud computing platforms. So you need to be able to have NAC supporting all those different types of situations. Long term, something we've seen for quite some time is a shortage of skilled security professionals. NAC is very much aimed at enterprise and large enterprise organizations. Even they have limited resources as well. And so whatever the challenge is, being able to provide support to those teams. And that's a challenge as well.
So a combination of ever more complex network environments and challenges finding the skill sets to support those, presenting a significant challenge for NAC adoption. Brett, what are you seeing?
Very similar. I think three things in particular among the things that Tony mentioned were the visibility piece relative to agentless devices. So with the IoT OT expansion and its relevance to NAC, with the example given of a device that's out there that may not be intelligent, but it can still be hijacked. It could still have vulnerabilities linked to it. There needs to be an easy way to identify that. So the old ways, the legacy ways of getting something, just some DHCP information, or being able to rely on an agent, or rely on radius in some fashion to identify the device, those are out. What you really need is the ability to, in a non-intrusive manner, be able to identify those devices. And it doesn't really matter what the type of device is or what category it is. So in the Genian NAC architecture, this was recognized early on with the development of our product, and the way we addressed that particular challenge was to introduce the concept of a network sensor, especially relative to manufacturing, as some of Genian's early customers were very large global enterprise manufacturing customers. They had this demand, so it sort of drove how the product was designed. And these sensors can be distributed throughout the network non-intrusively. They won't take down your networks. They don't require you to integrate with your switches, with your wireless controllers, with your access points. Any IP-enabled device that's on the network that's generating any kind of ARP packet gets picked up by the sensor, and the device platform intelligence will do the categorization, including identifying if they're end of life and linking the platform to vulnerability. So whether it's something that's an OT device, or whether it's something like a Cisco switch that is end of life 3 years ago, those kinds of devices both pose a risk, both need to be identified and categorized, and also can't do it via agent, radius, etc. So that's the first thing that I would mention relative to challenges that need to be met. The next thing to touch on would be the challenge regarding technical personnel and being able to actually implement a NAC solution. So historically, legacy NAC has been associated with very difficult, complex integrations. And because of that, what you have is your NAC deployment turns into a project. So the last thing any IT staff needs is another project on their plate, especially when you're talking about SME environments where you may have one or two or a handful of people doing everything. So the Genians ARP enforcement method really removes the reliance on network dependency and network complexity. What we found is that, looking at over the last course of 15, 16 years, is that the complex NAC integrations actually sometimes just get shelved and the project never gets off the ground, and therefore the network just remains vulnerable. By having something that's rapidly deployable like our sensor, which can be physical or virtual, and done quickly with relatively low experience, you can actually get that visibility, and you don't have to be a CCIE or a radius NAC expert to deploy them. And then the last component is really relative to cloud, and I think that's where virtualization comes in to play. But really, Genian NAC has been delivering cloud managed NAC already for over 3 years. So any customer that wants that can have it, and that's really important, especially for the cloud adoption rates that we talked about a little bit earlier. And the platforms, of course, as Tony mentioned, need to vary to be able to support public and private clouds.
All right. So given that, for a while now, we've been hearing about what comes next, right? A lot of buzz in the industry about next gen NAC. How do you all define that, and what do you think is required for customers to be able to take advantage of it?
Well, I think playing on the point that we were making about not enough skilled personnel. I think ultimately what the next generation NAC is supposed to do is provide the better support for those SOC teams. Ultimately, I mean, and let's discuss that. The first generation NAC, people sometimes refer to as NAC 1.0, was fine for that traditional PC server, but it's when they tried to go into that whole IoT integration that they ran into problems. Some people got burned by it, and it took time for NAC vendors to reestablish those relationships with NAC, we call it 2.0, which had the IoT support in it, the agentless technology that we saw emerging. And so that has now helped drive NAC into more applications and more end use cases. So I don't know if you want to say, what is NAC? Is it NAC 3.0 or next generation NAC? Everyone's still debating the terminology. Nevertheless, what it comes down to is providing better tools to the SOC teams to offload many of the functions and to be able to automate their workloads. And again, this is relieving them of a lot of that time and that stress. And as Brett was saying, like, avoid turning it into a project. So overall, what we're going to be seeing is improved visibility and assessment, especially if we're talking about industrial IoT, and the whole IT-OT convergence. Agentless technology is one example. We're going to see enhanced integration, not only with other security technologies, but something else that is growing as well, software-defined perimeter, SDP. We're seeing advanced support for use cases such as mobility, guest access, work from home, and BYOD. I'm not going to go through it, but you can see the different types of functions that we're talking about for more advanced support. Focus on easy deployment and management. Being able to get it off the ground and get it deployed. Again, we don't want that to be a big bear for the SOC teams. And also onboarding, improve that as well. Also security automation. And there you see all the different things that NAC, next generation NAC is there for, provide security innovation. We were talking a little bit about Zero Trust Network. That is growing in momentum. And so what you'll be seeing is innovations in terms of orchestration and integration aimed at a Zero Trust Network platform. Many of the NAC vendors are the base or the foundation for a Zero Trust Network architecture. And we were talking before about the public cloud. So greater support for AWS, Azure, and other cloud computing platforms. And kind of tied in with that, NAC as SaaS is growing quickly as a deployment option for NAC.
Thanks, Tony. Brett, if I'm one of those SME customers that you referenced a few minutes ago, is this next generation NAC really a bridge that I want to buy for the reasons Tony just gave us, or is it a bridge too far, or what?
Sure. The different companies are going to have different levels of expertise and different levels of needs. So if you're a large enterprise or campus customer and you have a pretty sophisticated security team, you may have more needs and you may want to leverage everything that a next gen NAC of the future would have to offer. But even if you're not, and if you're SME customer, you're still going to leverage at least a portion of that, almost guaranteed, because there's certain things that are undeniable as you move into the future. So to follow up on some of the points Tony talked about relative to automation, that's obviously key. The automation piece needs to be able to leverage everything else in the ecosystem. So for example, with more and more people working remotely because of COVID, you need to have better reporting on remote activity, both of the security posture of the endpoints connecting, who is connecting, do they have the right privileges? And all that needs to be audited, and all that needs to be integrated with other systems on your network. So a perfect example is you need to be able to quickly and easily integrate those remote logins and that the posture or the privilege access of those remote devices with other systems such as Slack or Teams, etc. And being able to do that quickly and easily is key with all the remote collaboration that's taking place. So security automation needs to go to the next level. That's the first part. The next thing would be relative to zero trust and potentially software-defined perimeter. So the product that you choose that is going to support you well into the future needs to have both of those components. Zero trust architecture, zero trust networking, as Tony mentioned, really it's a framework. So a lot of vendors will try to tie it to their specific product, but really zero trust networking is a framework. There's different ways to implement that. So I think the best choice for a customer really of any size is to be able to have zero trust networking built into the NAC product, and also to have an SDP option for your hybrid cloud environments where you may have half of your resources on-prem and half in the cloud. So you really need to have both of those options to support those kind of environments. And then lastly, with the cloud adoption and virtualization, that needs to go to the next level. So just saying that you have a cloud managed NAC is one thing, but being able to deliver that in a multitude of different ways to meet all the different kinds of environments you're going to come across is really what a product needs to do. What that means is virtualization, not just for individual customers, but for MSPs. So MSPs need to have the option to be able to have a Docker containerized NAC solution that can be multi-tenant and can be deployed on their particular cloud. And that means that your solution needs to come in different flavors. So you need to be able to have something that can be easily deployed on AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, whatever the case may be. So it has to be virtualized, containerized, and then easily deployable, whether you're a customer who wants to deploy on your own cloud or whether you're an MSP who wants to have a multi-tenant environment on whatever cloud infrastructure you have. And with Genians having already 3 years in cloud managed NAC, we have a real big head start there. But you may find a lot of solutions out there trying to play catch up because really that's the environment we're dealing in today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brett. As is typically the case when it comes to the cloud, networking, all things security, this conversation today has given us plenty to think about. And as we wrap things up for the moment, is there anything you think we've missed about where NAC is heading and what customers might need to take into consideration as they go forward? Any closing comments, particular topics that we haven't highlighted yet? Tony?
Well, my job is to try and forecast the future. And 2020 has been a most challenging time period of late. As we started out the year, we were looking at NAC still, humming along. This is the growth rates that we have right now for NAC. And I had been foreseeing the growth rate dropping just because the base number for the market was growing. So even if you grow by the same amount, the percentage growth will drop. But I was still looking at a strong double-digit growth rate, somewhere right around here. And then when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, everything just, you had to just basically do a hard restart on the forecasting. Vendors, cybersecurity vendors, and this is not just NAC, across the board, they've been focusing on supporting their customers' business continuity, helping them make that transition to work from home. It's kind of hard to stay in business if your customers go out of business. So whatever you can do to help them get to where they need to be in terms of security. So many vendors, they've relied on deferring contracts, discounting, providing some free upgrade on a trial basis, whatever that might be. And so Q2 and Q3 revenues are going to be adversely impacted. We had a good Q1. I think just about every vendor had said that. But as we get into a new normal, it's kind of hard to say that, new normal. Frost & Sullivan view is that we're going to see things start to pick back up in the fourth quarter of 2020. And so we are firmly believe there will be a V-shaped recovery, and that in 21 we'll get back to that double-digit growth rate that we were at before. So for those who think that NAC is dead, that this is still a strong and viable market. All right, we see the capabilities coming on for the next generation NAC. That's going to help. We still have more connected devices that you need to protect, and increasing cloud usage. And we have seen that the bad guys will take advantage of anything. So as you have more people working remotely, they become even more of a risk as attack from the bad guys. And so that network security becomes even more important. So we were talking about zero trust. NAC is a core technology. There's growing interest in zero trust network. That's been accelerated because of work from home. That you have to be able to protect all those remote workers, because now you've really stretched out your network quite a bit. And so as we're going into this and these terrible storm clouds of this pandemic that has been upsetting our entire lives, and we're trying to figure out what's going on. People have asked sometimes, is there any silver lining in this cloud? And my response is, the silver lining in the cloud, it is the cloud. Because the response we've had to this terrible disease, where we're trying to keep our lives going, it's obvious that being able to rely on the cloud to keep our businesses and our lives going is very important. And in terms of security, being able to deliver and deploy security solutions to remote devices, the cloud is invaluable. And because of that, we need to protect that cloud. And NAC has really, it highlights the value of NAC as a key tool in being able to protect us from the hackers during this really terrible crisis.
Tony, Brett, your view?
Well, I think two things come to mind for me. One is definitely, related to the fact that, NAC will go away when the problems that NAC has to solve are no longer there. And we're nowhere near that right now. They change, they move, they migrate, but they're still there. So whether or not you use something that you consider more of a legacy NAC solution to control access to your network, or you have an SDP component or SDN or whatever the case may be, controlling access to the network or network access control is going to be there. So how we relate to it might change, but the need for it is going to be there. And then secondly, as Tony pointed out, teams are stretched so thin just trying to maintain their infrastructure and enabling remote access, sometimes permanently for a portion of their company now, and having to support that now moving forward. That makes the ease and the rapid deployment of whatever solution you choose all that more important. So the one thing that I would just advise customers is that if you can't easily and quickly deploy a NAC solution with very low level of technical expertise rapidly into whatever network environment or cloud environment you have to do a trial or to do a test, then you certainly will not be able to do that in production. So my main advice would be test that. Make sure you can do it, run a test, do a trial. It should be able to be done quickly, easily, rapidly, and it shouldn't matter what your environment is. And if you find a product that can do that, then that's a good product to have.
Well said. I think, for me, what today's discussion underscores is just how much NAC really does remain an important element of any enterprise's cyber defense strategy. Far from being ready for its obituary to be written, NAC is actually all the more critical, I would say, as IT environments become ever more complex in this age of hybrid multi-cloud computing, in which operators are tasked with ensuring the old CIA, the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of application workloads and data assets, moving across multiple compute, storage, and networking domain boundaries. So thanks once again to our panelists today, Tony Massimini of Frost Sullivan and Brett Hamill, Solutions Architect at Genians, for their perspectives on the current reality and for helping to enlighten us on the future potential of network access control. Talk to you again soon, gents.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, goodbye.